ever since I was little, I've always been interested in neon lights. So I thought, let me make a video so we can learn about what they are and how they work. Side note, this is going to be a pretty simple video, so if you have a scientific background, you might want to skip it, but if you don't know much about chemistry or anything like that, then I think this is the video for you. So let's get started. So what are neon lights? Well, a neon light is a gas-filled glass tube. Now the gas in this case are usually noble gases like neon, xenon, stuff like that. And we're going to talk about what noble gases are in the next slide. Now this glass tube has electrodes on each end. An electrode is a substance that conducts electricity usually through a non-metal. And to this electrode, a high voltage is applied. So what is a voltage? A voltage is essentially the pressure by which an electric current moves through some kind of medium. Now this voltage is applied and ionizes this gas. I'm going to talk about what ionizing is a little later. So we have essentially an electric current that moves through this tube and affects this gas in a way that emits light in the process. So let's go a little deeper and talk about noble gases. So let's think about royalty, especially royalty back in the day, like, you know, these people right here. When you think about royalty, you might think, you know, posh, uptight, conceited. These people did not want to interact with the everyday common folk. They didn't want to interact with the peasants. So you can think of noble gases just like that, nobility. And these gases by nature are inert. They're non-reactive because most atoms, almost every atom, wants to have what's called an octet. Every atom has a shell. Now, this is a very basic definition. The outer shell is where the reactions happen because that's where electrons will interact with other electrons. Neon and other noble gases have a full shell. They have 8, so they're perfectly fine by themselves. So they don't really interact with many things. They do make certain molecules, but it's not a lot. Now, when we're talking about this shell, this electron configuration, we have all kinds of atoms that have different arrangements. So in this case, oxygen has 6 electrons. Now, oxygen does exist in what's called an allotrope, which means it exists in a bunch of different forms by nature. So you'll have oxygen gas and all kinds of other stuff, ozone and things like that. So oxygen, for example, when it interacts with 2 hydrogens in water, these hydrogens bring in 1 electron because hydrogen usually has 1 in an outer shell. And when it combines with oxygen, now oxygen is happy. And so these noble gases, they already have what they want. Now helium is a little different. It doesn't have 8, but it's still happy. It's still complete. So it takes a lot of energy for these noble gases to even react. So we're going to talk about that right now. So this is a electrode, the best drawing I could get. I really just traced this from a picture on the internet, but you have a negative side and a positive side. And this electrode is an alternating current, which basically means the current moves back and forth. A direct current only moves in one direction. So if you have a direct current for a neon light, it'll only make color on one end. This is why we want alternating, because it makes color everywhere. So let's talk about what's happening. So number 1, so we have this current that strikes this atom, let's say xenon. And what happens is these electrons surrounding xenon, one of them or a few might pop off. You think of it like beads on a string. They pop off because of this energy, and the electrons, number 2, they move to the positive side because opposites attract. And in the process, number 3, these noble gases who had a even number of protons and electrons, they lose an electron. So now they're positively charged because they have more protons than electrons. Now this excites them. It causes them to want to react and get back to their natural state because that's where they're the most happy, the most whole. And these positive ions that are ionized, right now they have this charge, they move to the negative side of the electrode. Now number 4 here, these atoms are moving one way and the electrons are moving the other way, so they're eventually going to run into each other, involving more energy. And in this process, number 5, these ionized noble gases, in this case this ionized xenon, will become whole again it's gonna finally grab that electron and come back to its natural state. So in this process, it emits light. So let's talk about how that even works. So we mentioned before that when these electrons pop off, they become excited. These atoms become excited. And I mentioned that this is how they release light and color. So let's talk about that. So number one, this inert gas is what's called in the ground state. It's fine where it's at, it's not excited, and this is why it doesn't react. It doesn't need to react with anything because it's not excited enough to involve itself with anything else. So when this electric current hits these atoms, they get excited and they jump up in energy level. Think about like a kid getting some candy or some sweets. They get really, really excited. Eventually they crash. Now I mentioned that in this excitement, these atoms, they want to react with something to come back to their natural energy level. And when they recombine with that lost electron, they go down in energy level to something neutral, lower. And in that net loss of energy, light is emitted in the form of photons. So that's the net loss. And this light happens to be of a certain part of the visible light spectrum. And I spoke a couple videos ago about how light in the waveform has wavelengths, and each wavelength will give us a different color. So this is where the color comes from, right? So if you're 500, you're gonna get green, or 700, you're gonna get red, and anything like that. So this photon that gets released gives us the color, and we see that color, and that's why it's perceived as light, because of that jump up in energy, and that jump down to a lower energy emits that photon. So last slide here, like I said, these colors come in different varieties. So neon can come in red or orange red, and that's 700 nanometers. Helium can often come in yellow. Argon can be, I think, purple and a blue, and then krypton can be green. And this is because of that release of the photon, and in the waveform, like I said, it has a certain wavelength, and that's perceived to us as color. So let's go back through the video and do our little review to refresh ourselves on what was talked about today. So we talked about how neon lights are glass-filled tubes with these electrodes that conduct electricity, and a voltage, a current is pushed through these. It hits this gas, and then this gas emits light. Many of these gases are inert. They're noble gases. They have that complete shell, and this shell is what makes them happy. And these noble gases, like I said before, are complete, so they're not going to want to react with anything unless a lot of energy is applied to them. Then we talked about how this even works. This current hits the atom, it releases an electron, they move to the different sides of the tube, and then they eventually recombine, and all this involves a lot of energy and excitement, and eventually results in this atom becoming whole again. Then we spoke about how when these atoms get excited, they jump up in energy level, and they're highly reactive. And then they eventually come back down in energy level, and that net loss of energy emits a photon, a particle of light, and that's perceived by us as color depending on the wavelength. And then we spoke briefly about what elements produce what colors. In that net loss of energy, different elements will produce a different array of colors because of those wavelengths. These are only a few. There's a lot more colors involved, and these tubes can be multicolored and a bunch of other stuff. So that's all I got. My apologies for not posting a video last week. I have a lot going on in my life right now, but we're back to the regularly scheduled programming. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you guys learned a lot. I definitely learned a decent amount making this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll be back soon with another video.